Welcome back to the deep dive. We talk a lot about how work is changing, but today we are zeroing in on one of the biggest forces at play right now, and that is artificial intelligence.
AI and automation. That's right.
I think a lot of our listeners, and definitely, myself included, are thinking about this a lot. Like, what does this mean for our jobs? What does this mean for the future?
Right.
Is this going to be a job stealer, or are there actually going to be, a bunch of new opportunities out there that we can't even conceive of yet?
A lot of people are wondering about this.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what we're diving into today.
Yeah.
Trying to get to the bottom of this question: is AI primarily a job stealer or a job creator?
Yeah.
And we've got a whole stack of reports and studies that we've combed through.
Yeah.
Some really interesting examples. So hopefully you'll come away from this with a better understanding of what's really going on.
So to get started, to take a step back for a moment, the idea of machines taking over tasks that humans used to do, this isn't exactly new, right? Right.
You only have to look back at the Industrial Revolution.
Yeah.
I mean, that was a massive shift.
Yeah. I mean, imagine, going from craftspeople to assembly lines.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a total upheaval in terms of how things were made.
Yeah.
And the types of jobs available.
Right.
So, yeah, you could imagine people back then having a lot of anxiety about these new machines coming in.
Right.
And what their jobs were going to look like.
But what feels different now about AI and automation is that it's not just about physical labor.
Yeah, that's a good point. In the past, it was largely about, augmenting physical strength.
Right.
Like how much can you lift,
Right. What's revolutionary about AI is its ability to replicate cognitive functions.
Yeah.
It's almost like minds.
Yeah.
Like computer programs that can think,
Yeah.
and learn and make decisions. And we're seeing this already. AI that can write code,
Yeah.
analyze medical images to diagnose diseases, generate art and music. I mean,
Wow.
this is a whole other level of automation
Right.
than we've seen before.
So what do the numbers tell us about how many jobs might actually be affected here?
Well, forecasts are a little bit all over the place.
Yeah.
The World Economic Forum estimates that AI could displace 85 million jobs by 2025.
85 million. That's a huge number.
It's a big number.
Yeah.
But the same report also suggests that AI could create 97 million new jobs.
Okay, so there's another side to the coin here.
Yes.
It's not all doom and gloom, potentially.
Right. It's not just jobs disappearing. But I think a really important caveat is that this net gain is highly dependent on our ability to adapt
Right.
and reskill.
Right.
These new jobs will probably require different skills.
So it's not just about how many jobs there are, but what kinds of jobs and whether people have the right skills to fill them.
Exactly. And then we also saw McKinsey estimates that about 30% of tasks in 60% of occupations could be automated. I mean, just using current technology. We're talking things like routine clerical work,
Yeah.
large-scale data entry, even things like radiology. AI can now analyze medical images.
It's interesting, though, to kind of go back to this historical perspective, You mentioned technology often creating more jobs than it destroys.
Yeah.
So how do we kind of wrap our minds around that?
Well, I think if you look back, the printing press, the internet, every time we've had a major technological shift, there have been job losses.
Right.
But it also leads to these whole new industries.
Yeah.
And job categories that no one could even imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, software development, social media management,
Right.
e-commerce, these are all pretty recent.
Yeah.
And they were all driven by technology. So the argument is that AI could follow a similar pattern.
Okay, so, those are big numbers and maybe a little abstract. Let's look at some real world examples.
Yeah.
So, starting with logistics, and I think everyone's familiar with Amazon. Right.
I mean, the fulfillment centers are like the poster child for automation.
Uh-huh.
Robots are handling, I think, something like 75% of the item retrieval.
Huge number, yeah.
Yeah, and, that's where the concern about job losses comes in, right? You see these incredibly efficient robots, and you think, okay, well, what happens to the people?
Right. Yeah.
What happens to the warehouse workers?
Yeah, and it's a legitimate concern. But Amazon's also said that this automation has led to the creation of, new types of jobs. Like they reported creating something like 700 new tech roles in just 1 year.
Oh, wow.
Robotics engineers, AI trainers, data analysts. So, all the people needed to design and maintain those systems.
Right. So it's not It's not a one-for-one replacement. It's something, it's kind of creating different kinds of jobs.
Yeah,
We
exactly.
also came across this really compelling story of a former warehouse worker, Maria Gonzalez,
Right.
who actually went through this firsthand. Yeah, and she's a great example of adaptation. She
Yeah.
was a picker, and she was able to transition to a role as an automation supervisor. And
Wow.
she's actually making more money,
Mhm.
and she's, the work is less demanding.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, instead of, walking miles each day, she's overseeing the robots.
Yeah, that's amazing. But, you have to wonder, is Maria's experience typical,
Right.
right? It's not just what we automate, it's who we uplift in the process.
That's a very good point. Yeah. Some people might make that transition really well,
Right.
but we also have to think about, the people who are left behind.
Absolutely. Okay, let's look at another sector. How about healthcare? We saw this interesting company, Path AI,
Yeah.
and this seems like a different kind of application of AI, right? Where it's not so much replacing humans, but helping them.
It's augmenting them.
Yeah.
So Path AI uses AI to help pathologists,
Okay.
and they're able to analyze tissue samples,
Mm.
to detect diseases
Yeah.
like cancer with an accuracy rate of something like 98%. It's pretty incredible.
So this is presented more as like a collaboration between humans and AI.
Yeah, and it's important to highlight that, right?
Yeah.
It's not about machines taking over.
Right.
It's about making those pathologists better,
Right.
right? It's enhancing what they can do. And this is also creating new roles.
Okay.
Like we're seeing, AI ethicists, people who are thinking about responsible use of AI,
Right.
telehealth coordinators,
Yeah.
specialists in precision medicine. So again, it's like we're seeing this shift, not just machines taking over, but this kind of working together.
Yeah, and we even heard Dr. Kwame Johnson talking about this idea of symbiosis.
Right, Dr. Johnson, yeah. He says the real risk isn't machines taking over, but it's not being prepared for this collaboration.
Right.
Right. So, AI is really good at that, pattern recognition,
Yeah.
data crunching. But humans, we've got judgment, empathy. We're good at complex reasoning. So so his point is the future belongs to the people who can do both.
Mhm.
Imagine a doctor, using AI to scan medical images.
Yeah.
The AI could, flag potential anomalies, but it's the doctor who's going to make the final diagnosis and treatment plan.
Right.
So that's symbiosis, right?
Yeah.
The best of both worlds.
So a symbiosis is kind of the goal. What kinds of skills are we going to need in the future?
Right.
Because it sounds like the job landscape itself is undergoing a pretty big transformation.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're going to see a decline in some of the, more traditional sectors
Yeah.
that are more easily automated.
Uh,
But I think, things like green energy,
right.
technology development,
Yeah.
AI itself, maintenance and support, those are going to grow. And LinkedIn reported that 74% of companies
Wow.
are now prioritizing skills over formal degrees.
Okay, so there's a real shift in how employers are thinking about hiring. So what are these new literacies? What are these, what's in demand?
Coding is obviously big,
Yeah.
right? But we're also seeing, critical thinking,
Hmm.
problem solving,
Yeah.
creativity,
Yeah.
and adaptability,
Right.
which I think is really key. Like, can you learn new things?
Right.
Can you adjust? And we also love this story of James Lee, the truck driver,
Yeah, that's a great story.
who retrained as a drone technician.
Yeah, his brother said to him, learn drones.
Yeah, exactly. And he ended up inspecting wind turbines.
Yeah.
And he's, safer, better paid.
Yeah, that's great. But, James's story raises the question of access to training.
Right.
And, how do you encourage people to adapt, right?
Yeah.
Especially when it's such a big change, And do people have the resources? How can we steal this?
Yeah, that's a huge question. How do we make this kind of resilience, and upskilling more accessible?
Right.
Right? Not just for a few people, but for everybody.
Right. And that brings us to this issue of worker support.
Right.
We touched on the gig economy earlier, which is, it's flexible, but it can also be pretty unstable.
Yeah.
Not a lot of job security. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, it's interesting because it does offer flexibility, but it's also, it can be precarious.
Right.
Right. So we have to think about, these different models.
Yeah. And how we protect people.
Okay.
But, it doesn't have to be a totally negative picture.
No,
Right.
not at all.
We've also seen examples of AI augmenting human capabilities.
Yeah, and we love this idea of augmentation over replacement,
Right.
right? It's a much more, I think, a much more optimistic view. And, we saw the example of UPS, right? They used AI-powered route
Yeah.
planners. So not only was it more efficient for the company, but driver turnover actually dropped by 50%,
Wow.
right? So you can imagine it made the job less stressful for the drivers, and they were happier. And then on the creative side, yeah, we looked at Adobe's Firefly AI,
Right.
which is, it's not replacing designers, but it's giving them these amazing new tools
Yeah.
to be more creative.
Yeah.
And it takes care of some of the more tedious tasks.
Right.
So it's freeing up those humans to focus on the higher level stuff.
Yeah.
And I think, it really emphasizes this idea that the future isn't about humans versus machines.
Right.
It's about humans working through machines.
So to sum it all up for our listeners, it really sounds like the impact of AI on jobs isn't set in stone. It really comes down to the choices that we make.
Yeah.
How do we implement this technology?
Right.
And how do we support workers during this transition?
I think you said it perfectly. I mean, this idea of AI being either, all good or all bad, it's too simplistic.
Right.
The reality is more nuanced, and the real impact on jobs is going to depend on technology, on the economy,
Yeah.
and most importantly, the policy decisions that we make.
Right. And it leaves us with a really big question for everyone to think about. Is this wave of automation, is it going to concentrate power?
Right.
Or is it going to lead to greater opportunity for everyone? That's something we all have to grapple with.
Absolutely.
Well, that's it for this deep dive. But stick around, because next time we're going to be diving into something that is so crucial right now, and that is the idea of the great reskilling.
Yes.
How lifelong learning is becoming absolutely essential.
Absolutely crucial in this age of AI.
We're going to be looking at some cutting-edge programs, talking to people who have made these incredible career
That's
transitions.
inspiring stuff.
It is. It is. So how can education keep up with all of this innovation? You definitely do not want to miss that.
Make sure you join us
Yeah.
for the next deep dive.
All right. Until then, be well, everyone.
See you next time.
Bye.